I didn't do Team Sky because I loved cycling and I was passionate about cycling. I got into Team Sky because I was passionate about what happened to David not happening to somebody else.
I was very much, I had a career of two halves, and literally was split in the middle by my doping ban. And in that first half, I kind of look back on that with regret, the fact I was quite a prima donna, and I'd had no opportunity to learn how to lead. I kind of came in guns blazing, and by the time I was 23, I was basically leading, I was leading France's #1 cycling team at the Tour de France. And when I had that ban of 2 years and got to really kind of change as a human and come back with a lot more humility, I was a much better leader, and I became an owner of a team. I was still a winner, still a leader outright, but I actually began to relish the role of what we call the road captain.
I didn't do Team Sky because I loved cycling and I was passionate about cycling. I got into Team Sky because I was passionate about what happened to David not happening to somebody else. And that decision was like, if we make compromises at this stage in the game, at the very inception of the team, that could potentially compromise my ability to do that. And so my own values enabled me to say, you know what, I believe that this team is going to have a way bigger impact on the sport than me fighting for David to be a part of it. And so being able to live by my own values and do that was really important to me. And then the challenge I then faced was, further down the line in Team Sky, finding out some of the, decisions that had been made that I wasn't party to, that I wouldn't necessarily have agreed with, and everything else. That then became a real conflict in my own head of like, wow, what is this now, and what do I stand for, and how does that all fit together? But at the time, and now, if I could turn back time and change the decisions, I wouldn't. I still think that the decisions that Team Sky were making were the right decisions for the sport, and they were very aligned to my values. For me, it's probably the biggest leadership lesson I learned in my life, and it guides me even now, because it was at a personal level, I would have loved David to have been part of the team, and as a personal and professional level, I believe that David had something to offer the team that was unique and different to anyone else in the sport at that point in time. However, I also fundamentally believe that the sport needed to change. And I fundamentally believe that change needed to be systemic, and it needed to be from the top, and it needed to be done in a way that created real conflict in some ways. And that's what we did. It was a controversial policy. Was it the right policy? No, I don't think it was. But was it right for that point in time? Yes, because it forced conversations that weren't happening. It forced, the grey area of, okay, well, if we think they've been doping, but they've never been caught, but there's all this rumour. What does that mean? And the conversations that was forcing behind the scenes in Team Sky, in the sport, in UCI, in the ASO, people weren't party to that, but I was, and I was party to the decisions that Team Sky were making were changing the face of the sport.
When I came back after my ban, my biggest drive was, this shouldn't have happened to me. And my motivation for putting so much work into the anti-doping movements and spending years on commissions and putting myself on the line in the media was by, I knew that I could prevent it happening to younger riders. If I educated people and if I put myself on the line and I actually went and worked with commissions who'd never spoken to a doper before. And so that was my mission. And I think it worked, and it took years. But with Frances, it was the same. She was doing it for one person. She was doing it for me, in the sense that she knew. Well, it makes me a little sad.
How do you apply sport to big business? Because that's where you're at right now. I mean, David, you're doing it with your line as well. So how do you sort of apply that to a business brand like Bellstar?
That, to be honest, that was the appeal of Bellstar. It wasn't actually so much the coming into fashion, because I've never really had any particular interest in fashion. It was the idea. I've been in Team Sky for 12 years. I'd worked for Brailsford for most of my adult life. Actually, I've been in and around Dave, and I've learned so much. And I really wanted the opportunity to see if I could take all of that knowledge and lessons and learning and the stuff I've learned from Steve Peters and how do you build a winning team and apply it somewhere else. It's the bit of my job that I absolutely love. It's building. One of the first things I did was I created like a whole mission, and I got everyone branded sweatshirts. And I was like, I don't know how to do this other than doing it like we're a sports team. So you're all just going to have to come on that journey. And they're all on that journey, and we're in a really good place. And it's it's got the same challenges. I've got young people coming into their first job. How do you stop them burning out? How do you make them feel they're part of something? How do you give them the right development pathway? How do you make sure that they are accountable and taking ownership? And, it's all the same things, just in a completely different space. So I absolutely love it. And actually I think that's the bit that I'm passionate about. I think I've discovered coming here that the thing I love, the reason I love Team Sky, the reason I love doing the Eliud Kipchoge Challenge, the reason I love doing this is I love working in an environment where I can help people fulfill their potential. That's the thing I'm good at. It's the thing I enjoy. It's the thing I'm passionate about. It's what I get out of bed for in the morning. So yeah, it's been great to come and do it. I absolutely love it here. But I absolutely love it most places I go. So I'm like, I've never really done anything that I've not loved, because I don't think I'd be very good at it if I went somewhere and did something I didn't love. So I think just developing that learning and continuing to hopefully learn more about how to help people get the best out of themselves, really.
Do you find, Fran, coming from sort of intense sport, and obviously the riders and everyone involved are so hugely motivated, and the work ethic is just huge, coming into business, do you find the same work ethic, or do you sometimes find that because you're not waking up each day to try and go and win the Tour de France or whatever, that people sort of strolling in at 9 o'clock? Do
you know what?
And walking out the door at 5. Is that something that's a challenge, or?
It's a great question, Ben, because exactly. No, it's a great question, because I think that the biggest challenge that I've faced here is that you forget when you're in a professional sports team, particularly at like your level and at the level I was at with Team Sky, the majority of people who are on that team are at the very top of their game. They've done everything. They've been there. They've got, they're either right at the beginning of their career, but they're the best talent in their, country, or they've been a mechanic for 15, 20 years, and they're the best in the world at it. So that idea of like pushing yourself and striving for excellence and marginal gains and all of those things, that's a much easier thing to work with a group of people who are at their top of their game. Whereas when you come into a business, there are people who, quite frankly, they just want to pay the bills. They want to go home at 5 o'clock and see their kids. They're not here to be the best in the world at what they do. They're here to get paid. And trying to get to change the culture to make people feel like, being part of something is really special, and you spend more time in your work than you do any other part of your life. So actually, if you can make it something that has purpose and focus and determination and ambition and strive to be better, then you'll get more out of it. That's kind of the approach I've taken. But yeah, for sure, it's a totally different mindset that's needed to get excellence out of people in a business environment, as opposed to getting excellence out of people in a high performance sports team.
It's so funny you said that, because that was my transition out of bike racing into the real world. All of a sudden, I thought that's how you just achieve things, was just going all in. And it was 24/7, 365. And actually, I was like, that's not how you do it, is it? That's not very effective unless you're kind of, as Fran said, at this very pinnacle and on this passion-driven project. And I've been learning a lot of Francis regards that. How do you transfer that kind of this thing that you and I have experienced, and what gave us success in the past was that singular drive, and that kind of at times ruthlessness and selfishness, which is also quite a trait of elite athletes. But then actually transferring the good bits of that into, let me say, real world application is not easy. And it's something that Francis has been helping me with chapter 3, is kind of how do I kind of actually apply my core competencies into a business world. And it's not obvious. And it's been a very steep learning curve for me.
What do you think is sort of one nugget that you could give to everyday regular people from your lives of how to perform better every day?
One of my strongest attributes was not giving up, and just don't give up, especially in the second half of my career, oddly, when I kind of came back with more humility. And I used to tell younger riders, it's like, don't give up. It's like, that's also what I guess they do say in an idealistic way regards young businesses, is it's not companies that die, it's entrepreneurs that give up. But actually, I'm not so sure. I think it's choosing your fights. and making sure you know when not to give up and when to give up. And give up has such negative connotations, so it might just be letting go rather than giving up. If there's something you love and that you believe in, don't give up. But if you don't love it, you might have to let it go.
When you're trying to perform at your very best, you need to be happy and you need to be enjoying it. And that finding a place where you get some joy out of the work. You know, it's like I jokingly said earlier, I've never worked anywhere I don't love, but I think that's because I take a huge amount of satisfaction and joy from what I do. And that makes it easy to have the late nights. It makes it easier to do the long hours. It makes it easy to put in, because I absolutely love it.